So we're going to do a farm tour today. My wife started a YouTube channel, so I just wanted to get the baselines of our livestock out of the way. This is a winter paddock for our cows right now, probably for the foreseeable future as well. We've got four Jersey steers in here. Basically, we're just raising for our own freezer. We're not using any grain. They're being rotationally grazed in whatever months we can. We've also purchased 2 Dexter heifers. So we plan to start a small herd of Dexter heifers. We chose the breed because of our limited equipment and space. Eventually you'll probably get 1 or 2 more cows and a bull. Alright, we gotta get some feed for the fryer shed. Okay, so this is our fryer shed. When we first started renting this place, there was already a wall in between the shed. So we've got rabbits on both sides. We feed them their pellets. This is actually a quail cage. We used to have quails and the eggs would come down here. I really like quail eggs, but ever since the pandemic broke out, quail have been hard to find and more expensive. So our watering system in here, because we don't have water coming into this shed, basically totes hooked up to water lines with the same water nipples that are in our breeder barn. Basically we run a hose from the old barn and fill these up every few days. I'll show you the tote on the other side as well. So this is the other side. We put 5 to 6 fryers in each hole. There's some bigger holes on these cages back here. Could put up to 8 or 10. Same thing, a little bit bigger of a tote because we've got more cages over here. We actually don't have enough space in here right now, especially in the summer when the rabbits grow a bit slower and they back up. So I'll probably be putting a second layer, a second level of cages here eventually.
And how do you prevent this from freezing in the Canadian winters?
It did freeze one day when the door was left open by accident. Besides that, I don't think we're gonna have too much problem. I bought some used insulated tarps. So there's some spots with double layers, the worst wind spots. Last year we did have a bit of freezing problems in here, but we've changed some things since then. I mean, if we get a minus 20 night with some really bad wind, we might have some problems. I do have a tank heater in here that's not turned on right now that we can turn on in some of those really cold nights. That'll help keep the water in the line from freezing, we hope.
And what's that thing hanging from the roof?
Yeah, so we just have a scale hanging here. We put a bucket on here and we weigh the rabbits every Monday. Anything over 5 pounds we take to the processor for sale. This is kind of a makeshift fresh air intake, what they call cold air intake pipe. Forget it, the name is escaping me right now. But basically, in the summertime, we can't really use it right now because it's too cold. Some people in like a calf barn or a lamb barn or a sheep barn or something would keep it on all year round, but maybe if we had more rabbits in here, we'd be able to do that because there'd be more body heat. But yeah, mostly spring, summer, and fall. This sucks air from outside through a fan on the other side of the building and shoots it out little holes that I've drilled in this repurposed tile tube. The idea is to get fresh air into the building without giving the rabbits a draft. Rabbits get ammonia really easy from draft. Okay, so we're in the breeder barn now, or what we call the breeder barn. It's a room in the upstairs of the old barn on this property. I just wanted to explain the two sides of our agricultural business. These are the rabbits, basically raised commercially, pellet box from a feed mill. This is where we keep all our breeding stock, does. There'll also be grow out does in here, obviously bucks, and the odd pen of fryers that need to be moved over to the fryer shed when there's space in the fryer shed. To get a couple things out of the way about our agricultural business. These are the meat rabbits, obviously, and they're raised more commercially in cages, which is something we started before we moved here. And the reason we got into rabbits to this amount is because before we moved here, there was a couple places we lived where we actually didn't have any land space for grazing animals, etc. So, besides the rabbits, the rest of the animals we raise are actually raised outside on no grain pasture. Well, the chickens get a little bit of grain in the winter. I don't give them any grain in the summer. So we rotationally graze the sheep and the cattle. We move the chickens around a bit too. We like to get better at that, but we need to make some better movable buildings and stuff. The chickens right now are more just for our own consumption. When we get more lamb and beef in the freezer to sell, more grass-fed beef and lamb, we may get back into having more eggs to sell to the customers buying the meat as well. So we keep the rabbits for two reasons. I really like rabbits. I feel they're very sustainable. Some people have told me to switch to broilers many times in the past, and I always say I like that everything happens here. The breeding happens here. The babies get born here. Sorry about that. And you'd be amazed how many fryers we ship in a year off 50 breeding days for the amount of pellets and space that goes into them. So it's kind of like a guaranteed income for us to help sustain the rest of the farm. Also, rabbit manure is a cold manure. It's one of the best fertilizers you can use in your garden or your field. It doesn't compost like the other manures and heats up, so you can use it straight on your crops or your garden. We plan to do a little bit more no-till gardening this year, hopefully, kind of integrate that into our business, because we are shooting for sustainability and regenerative agriculture. So as long as we live here, we're not going to lower the amount of rabbits or change what we have here with the rabbits, because we use the manure not only for our garden but for our pasture fields as for extra nutrients. Because we don't have as much land as we'd like, we need that little bit extra organic fertilizer on our pasture to get the most out of it that we can. We would like to rent more pasture, but it's a very competitive area that we live in, and it's hard to find. Which brings me to my next point. We rent here, so this room in the barn is where we have our rabbit breeders. The fryer shed over there, where we have our fryers. A lean-to and a truck box behind the big buildings, where we keep cows or sheep in the winter. And then we rent pasture on the other side by our house, where right now the sheep are on the pond because there's a building there and it works nice for winter, and the chickens are up by the house. We'll show you that as we go around and do our chores today.
And what's that box behind you?
This is one of the two exhaust fans in this room. The reason I built a box around it is because when this is running, it shoots air out the sides at these cages that we installed here. So I also put a secondary flapper here, even though there's some on the outside there. They don't work the best, and that just stops when the fan goes off, because it's temperature controlled, it just stops the air from coming back in and creating a draft.
So Mike is explaining here that we use traditional water bottles on the tray cages because it isn't worthwhile to hook up the water lines. That the water lines are not going to be productive on these cages as they're overflow cages.
All the water lines tie into this float box here, which is hooked up to the plumbing in the barn. Okay, so we're gonna head over and water the cattle.
Okay, so here we're just filling the water jugs that we take over to our cows. We're using a hose out of the milk house. In this clip, Mike explains that this is one of the pastures we rotationally graze in the spring, summer, and fall. He also explains that we will be using the space between the wooden fence and the pond this year, and that the spot between the pine trees by the house and the pond also is fenced in, and our animals get access to that in the summer rotation as well. Now we're gonna head up to the house to check on the chickens and take some hay to the sheep.
Okay, this is where we keep our chickens. It's closer to the house. Actually prevents a lot of predators having it closer to the house. We have a way for them to get out to the backyard here. They're basically free range The ducks do have access to the pond. The chickens don't normally go down that far. We do rotate these animals a bit to kind of try to keep the chickens from digging up too much grass. So we'll basically rotate them from this backyard to say over by the garden there. Once we're done with the garden in the fall, we'll actually let them dig through the garden and pick up the scraps. And then we also have more netting that we can put out here. We let them out into this area where the kids' play area is for a few weeks, every few months as well. Down to the sheep now. Some half a flake of hay.
This is where the sheep are staying during the winter. It works well because it is an insulated building. The sheep also eat all the forage that the summer poultry left behind.
Another reason I have them down here and not the cows is because cows tend to still drink a lot of water in the winter, where the sheep, we bring them down a little bit of water, but they don't drink much, and when it freezes they tend to like to eat the snow. Also, there's lots of green forage around the pond. Not so much right now, but early winter and maybe early spring, late winter, that helps with their water intake. Some people may ask why we have so many different types of livestock, but it's because I strongly believe in sustainability. The sheep eat a different diet than the cows, so we run them all over every spot of land that we use here. There's stuff that the cows don't eat that the sheep will. It keeps the weeds down and helps use all the growth that we're getting.